And members of the public, if there are any indeed, welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit Committee. At the moment, we don't have a chair or vice chair due to absence and apologies. So that means Councillor Ron McCrossan as chair normally and Councillor Sandra Barnes as vice chair aren't here today. So I will be asking for nominations from the floor to chair this meeting in a minute. However, it's only right I just ask for apologies for absence and substitutions now. Are there any from the floor? Councillor Pope.
Thank you. As you've said, Councillor McCrossan isn't able to attend, and I'm substituting for him. And Councillor Barnes has sent her apologies, and Councillor Roxanne Ellis is substituting for her.
Thank you. Are there any others? Councillor Maltby?
Yes, Councillor Bestwick sends his apologies and I'm substituting for him.
Thank you. Does that tie in with your records, Ben? Right, thank you very much. So, do we have a nomination for the chair for tonight's meeting, please?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Roxanne Ellis to chair this meeting.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. We'll have a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? Welcome Councillor Ellis to the top table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If we now move on to item 2, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 18th of the 3rd, 25. Do I have a mover? Seconder? All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? I don't see any, so we can move straight on to item 4, external audit fees 2024 to 25, and that'll be you, Tina, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So the first report that I'm going to bring to you today is regarding the audit fees for the financial year 24-25. So audit fees are set by the Public Sector Audit Appointment Board, which is PSAA, who act as the appointable person for the audit of local government bodies that opt into its national scheme. The PSAA appoints the auditors and sets the fees based on a scale fee for the previous year. This is then adapted for changes in audit requirements to propose a new fee for each financial year. External audit fees have increased significantly over the past few years for a number of reasons. Some of these include a backlog of audits for local authorities, increased regulatory requirements, a limited number of qualified audit firms in the market, coupled with the national shortage of auditors and trainee auditors coming through the system. So these factors have led to higher costs for all councils across the UK. The current budget for external audit sits in our budget at £53,500 per year. The proposed fees for 24-25 are estimated to be in the region of £142,000, an increase of around £88,500. So we have known that fees are going to increase for quite a few years now due to the backstop arrangements and some of the things that we've just spoken about, and also the fraud. It's been quite difficult for us to estimate final fees for each of those years with a degree of certainty. So in recent years, what we've done is we've had some reserves that have funded those additional audit fees, and we've now depleted those reserves. So we have now cleared our backlog of financial statements, and we're heading into, a fresh new year, 24-25, we feel that it's prudent to ensure that our budget now has the right level of budget going forward for external audit fees. The council has no control over these fees. As I've said, they are set by the PSAA. We don't have to opt into the national scheme. An alternative would be not to opt in, but councils would then be responsible for making their own arrangements for appointing the auditors and undertaking all the necessary procurement around that. And as we've just said, there is some difficulty around securing auditors, the number of auditors in the market. So it is still deemed best value to opt into that scheme and let the PSAA do it for you. So the recommendation in this report is to note the revised fees and to recommend to full council that they approve the additional budget required for the fees for the 24-25 audit. We do have Jen from Mazars with us, so I'm sure she'd be happy to take any questions that you might have on the national increase in fees, and I'm also happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Graham Pope.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really, that the increase appears, someone new to this committee, to be quite an extraordinary jump from the previous fees. And you've said that some of this is down to a backlog of elements of audit, which we've now caught up on. So what's the likelihood of this fee coming down in future years?
It's highly unlikely that they will come down because these are the fees now that are set by the PSAA. I'm going to ask Jen if she's got any views on that.
Thank you. So on the fees then, as I was saying earlier, most councils saw this jump last year, so that is for the year ended 31st of March 2024. Gedling is seeing this relative jump this year because the previous audited years, so from 21-22, 22-23 and 23-24, we gave a disclaimed opinion. And so on two of those years, we did reduced audit procedures, which will then affected the fee. Now, those fees are still with PSAA for approval, but you would have seen the estimated fee as being much lower. So then to answer your question about why these have gone up so much, that is the same across the whole country. And when we talk about the backlog, it's not because we have not caught up on the backlog yet. The backlog, we have been able to draw a line under those previous disclaimed years in some ways, but we now got to look at rebuilding assurance. And 24-25, which I'll talk about a bit later, I won't go into it too much now, but we're going to do a full audit. So that's where you would also see that difference between last year and this year. And I think just to finish on that point, that this is part of an ongoing investment in audit, which was a system that was completely broken over the last few years, as evidenced by the backlog. So it needed this increased investment, and that's been seen across the country.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. That's actually more or less answered my question I was going to raise. I mean, by my calculation, it's a 165% increase, which I must admit seems a little exorbitant, even for the reasons outlined. And it's, I can understand why, given that everything else is going on. We were probably lucky to have dodged a bullet last year, by the sounds of it.
Councillor Greensmith.
Thank you, Chair. I know I probably are asking how long's a piece of string, but are we going to be looking at 88% increase for next year? I know we're talking about this year, but the next financial year, because obviously, 88% increase on 142,000 is one hell of a sum to go forward. And I do appreciate that auditor salaries have increased quite dramatically because of the lack of auditors in the industry.
I certainly hope not. As I say, when the PSAA sets the fees, they're done on a scale basis, which is based on last year's fee, and then they amend for any new requirements in the year. So I'm hoping, and I'm looking at Jen, for this, that we won't see significant increases. There is the rebuilding assurance work, which Jen has talked about. I believe that the government may fund some or all of that, hopefully, so that might not fall to us. Am I right in that, Jen?
Yeah, so just to answer the question about whether it will be always an 80% or however many 100% increase, that's very unlikely. If I use the example of other councils that are not in Gedling's position, so had a full audit in all of the years, you have not seen a massive jump in that way between last year and this year. It very much was between 22-23, if I'm remembering correctly, and 23-24 that you saw that jump, because that was when these emergency measures came in, and that was part of it. So obviously I cannot say with any certainty what future fees will be. It's not us who set them. But based on the last couple of years, you're not going to see another comparable huge jump. I wouldn't think so. But
Councillor Strong?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I couldn't hear you very well. I don't know if there's something wrong with the sound on the microphones, but I was going to say from the beginning that I found a 165% increase a little bit excessive. And I understand all the reasons given. What I can't understand is why it was such a backlog that it's made such an increase in costs, and why it was not budgeted for at least partly. We're used to things going up a little. We're used to things going up even a lot. But the gap between what was budgeted for and what it is actually costing is enormous. And I'm not happy about it at all, that it's we're presented with a fait accompli, and it's not a good thing to do. Is there any way of negotiating a lower price?
There is no way of negotiating a lower price because we don't set the fees, they're set by the PSAA. As Jen says, if we'd have had full audits over the past 3 financial years, the budget would have gone up accordingly in each of those years. Because we was caught by the backstop arrangements and the fraud, and we didn't have those full audits, we didn't need to budget for a higher price because we knew it wouldn't come in at that high. But it's almost like a cumulative effect that we've got this year. So we've caught up basically over the past kind of like 3-4 years. So we have seen a significant increase this year, but we would have seen it over a number of years if we'd have had full audits. I hope that makes sense.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm Jonathan Corsten, the independent person. Just a quick question, probably a question for Tina. When I was, as you know, I'm an independent person at the Rushcliffe Borough Council's Audit Committee, and I read in their report, because we were talking about the audit fees there at that committee meeting last week, and they received some grant funding to cover some of the cost of the audit fee. And I read there that it's £15 million available to councils across the country. Is Gedling entitled to that grant funding at all, do you know?
Don't know off the top of my head. It's not something I know about, but we'll definitely look into it. I don't think we haven't had anything. Do you know about any grant funding, Jen? That was no. Okay. I'll definitely talk to Rushcliffe about that, though. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm finding this somewhat confusing. When I look at the letter from Forvis Mazars, page 15, regarding the arrangements for billing, I notice that there are the 4 amounts of 35,000 plus, but that's only to 75% complete. Is there likely to be another 35,000 on top to take us to the end of that year?
The total amount is 142,000. I think we've already an element of that, I believe. But I'll check that out. But I know we have paid one amount of that, so that might be just what's left.
Right, yeah. Well, milestones completed, it says. So the audit annual report, year ended March 24, and then it's the same amount all the way through virtually. Audit plan issued, same amount. Audit 50% complete, same amount. Audit 75% complete. There's nothing for audit 100% complete. Am I being dim? So is there going to be another 35,000 on top?
So there's 4 lots of 35,000 there. So that work, sorry? Yeah, we do pay in advance, but that does add up, doesn't it? Yeah.
Sorry.
I think what you're saying is we're paying for the next quarter of activity.
Yeah.
So although it says 75% complete, you're paying, when we get to 75% complete, you're then paying for the next quarter.
I see.
So
Thank you.
that's what it means.
Okay, thank you. Are there, sorry, also, can I follow that up? Somewhere in the notes it says are we aware of any further variations and are there going to be any further discussions about these fees? I mean, we're told that they're not negotiable, but if there can be if further discussion is allowed, then why aren't we having them?
So, as part of the audit, there might be further work that needs to be done that's identified. If that is the case, then fees can often go up.
Right.
I think sometimes they can come down as well. Sometimes they are negotiated down. Is that right, Jen? Dependent upon the work that happens?
Oh, in the case of the backstop, that's
Yeah.
likely to happen, for example.
Yeah.
Right, it just...
So they are proposed fees at the moment, so they could change.
Thank you.
Councillor Pope.
Thank you. Hearing from Mr. Corstens, very helpfully identifying that there's possibly some grants available. Could I ask, that since one of the recommendations is that council is asked to agree to this additional funding, that when it comes to council, we have some information about whether we'd be eligible for those grants, so we've got a complete package rather than it being piecemeal.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? In which case, I move the recommendations. All those in favour? All against?
Can we make sure that what Councillor Pope has just said actually happens on the recommendations?
So do we need to add the recommendations on?
Another third recommendation, yeah.
Yep. In which case, Councillor Pope, were you proposing a third recommendation?
Yes, Chair. Can I propose that in a paper that goes to Council asking for these additional fees to be met, that there be some further information regarding the accessing or eligibility and accessing of grants to help support those monies?
Mr Coulson?
Can I just add, I can remember, I actually just double-checked the report, Rushcliffe report, and the report did say that it's £15 million available, and Rushcliffe got £18,000 to cover some of the increase. So that gives you an idea of possible figure available, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Coulson. Was that you seconding the recommendation amendment? Councillor Griffith? Excellent. In which case, we have to vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? Okay, all those against? Abstentions? Do you need me to speak louder? Okay. So, abstentions on the amended recommendation? Thank you. That's carried. So now we vote on the substantive. All those in favour of the amended recommendations in total? All those against the amended recommendations in total? Abstentions? Thank you. That's carried again. So now we move on to agenda item 5, accounting policies 2024-25, and that's Tina again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to present the accounting policies that have been used to produce a statement of accounts for 24-25. So it is considered best practice to give members the opportunity to consider the accounting policies used each year in the run-up to the production of the statement of accounts. Whilst we appreciate that it is pretty late in the day to bring these to you, as you know, that we've been in a bit of a strange position over the past few months where we've had to approve 3 separate lots of statement of accounts quite quickly. What I can say is that these policies are pretty much similar to what have come before you in previous years. They haven't changed fundamentally. There's only been one significant amendment, which is in respect to the leasing, IFRS 16, which was deferred until the 1st of April 2024. So it is applicable to the 24-25 financial statements. This has the impact of changing the accounting treatment of operating and finance leases. The council has very few inbound leases, so those where the council is lessee. So the impact on the financial statements is likely to be immaterial. The statements are currently being finalised for publication on the 30th of June. So we are assessing the impact currently on the statement of accounts. Once the statements have been published, we'll get them out to members of the Audit Committee, and they'll be on the agenda for next September. Next year, for the 25-26, so the current financial year, for the 25-26 statements, we will get you the accounting policies earlier. We will be back to normal. So the members of the Audit Committee have asked to approve the accounting policies for 24-25. Thank you.
Do we have any comments on the accounting policies 24-25? I see no comments, in which case move directly to voting on the recommendations. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. That's a nice easy one. So let's move on to agenda item 6, the Internal Audit Progress Report. And that will be presented by our Internal Audit partner, Gurpreet Dule.
Max, okay, sorry.
No, that's okay, thank you, Chair. So just to start with a brief introduction to the substitute members, because I appreciate you wouldn't have met us before. So I'm Max Armstrong, I'm a manager at BDO, and I'm responsible for overseeing the delivery of the internal audit plan and then reporting that back into this committee on a quarterly basis. So our first paper for this committee is our quarterly progress report. This sums up the progress delivered in our audit plan in the last 3 months since the last committee, and is a paper we bring to every committee each quarter. I'll start on page 44 of your packs, which shows a table summarising the individual audits delivered as part of the 24-25 plan, and that will be concluded in our annual opinion, which is the next item on the agenda, and then a summary of opinions against those. You'll see from the following page, which is a table of the 25-26 plan. We've started our planning phase for each audit, and field work has commenced and being delivered on the Q1 reviews. You'll also see the timelines we expect to report these into the committee over the next coming quarters. Included within our progress report, we have our 4 individual audit reports. So it's quite a large number. Normally we take sort of 2 or 3, but it's quite a large number today. So I'll present the exec summaries to the first 2, so parks and street care and fleet management, and my colleague Faye will present the other 2, so budget management and procurement and contract management. So I'm going to start on the parks and street care review. So this review was quite a large audit actually, covering a range of different areas. So we almost split it in half. So you've got the parks side, which looked at areas around reactive, proactive maintenance of the parks and the facilities within the parks. And then the street care side, which looked at the council's preparation and readiness in light of any sort of emergency action, so flooding, things like that, to remove debris and manage the streets. Our overall opinion for this review was moderate on the design side, and limited on the effectiveness, with 2 highs and 2 medium findings. Actually, when we look at those 2 highs I've outlined before, most of the findings relate to that first part around the parks, and specifically, which I'll come on to in the first finding, around tree and tree management. So the first 2 findings, actually, which were both considered high risk, link into that similar theme around trees. So firstly being there was quite a high number of trees that weren't logged on Tree Plotter, which is the council's tree management system. And then equally, when we then looked for a sample of reactive and proactive maintenance inspections and requests, there were delays beyond the levels we would expect, and in line with council's policies, there were delays to those actions being taken. And we've considered this high risk because clearly the impact of something going wrong could be high and potentially sort of endanger life. And that has been seen across other local authorities as well. High publicised cases in the news. There were also 2 medium findings relating to inventory management, particularly of parks equipment at the depot, critically around inventory logs not being retained to show up-to-date and reflective inventory held, and then day-to-day processes around checking items out when they're being used and logging them back in for effective inventory management controls. What is positive to see actually is the management response to recommendations we have raised, which are all agreeable and outline sort of clear steps that the council can take over the coming months and in some cases years due to the size of the project to ensure actually those recommendations are addressed. Secondly, onto the fleet management report. So this review was moderate in both design and effectiveness, with 4 medium recommendations and 1 low. This review focused on the council's management of its fleet, and again, covering quite a range of areas from acquisitions and disposals, the statutory compliance of the management of vehicles, so things like MOT check, servicing, and the management of the O licence and compliance with statutory legislation around that, and then again, inventory controls within the vehicle workshops. To draw out some of those medium findings raised, and the first finding was around the O licence specifically and the statutory requirement for a transport manager. So currently the person who held that role in the council has left as of about middle of last month. So at the point of finalising the report, the council had made a request to the traffic commissioner for a grace period. Our understanding from speaking to colleagues in the council is that it's likely to be accepted. It may have been accepted since it has been accepted, there you go. So for a grace period up to September, and the actions the council are looking to take in the meantime are to train relevant staff on the CPC qualification, which needs to be held to hold that transport manager role and comply with the licence. Similarly to the Parks and Street Care review, there were gaps identified around inventory and stock management, particularly the documenting of inventory in the workshop, albeit the workshop does operate a just-in-time model, so there's not large quantities of inventory actually held. Most items are ordered to use straight away. And then there was similar findings raised around vehicle checks, driver penalty point checks. Oh, sorry. Do we pause? Yeah. No, sorry, that's fine. Okay. To continue on that point, so there were checks around individual drivers when they're accruing points and ongoing checks critically for that to ensure that ultimately people who have subsequently been disqualified or received a certain number of points aren't using council vehicles. And then finally, around the documenting of vehicle disposals. So vehicles, when disposed, are taken to auction, and that the finding around that related to the actual documenting of that process, the relevant approvals, and ultimately that rationale for disposal. I'll pause on those 2 reports. Before bringing any questions in, I'll pass over to my colleague Faye to present the other 2 reports, and if we stop at the end and invite any questions, that might be a bit smoother.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Faye Orton, and I conducted both the procurement and contract management report and the budget management report. So I'll take a few minutes to talk through both reports, and then we can go over questions. Starting with budget management, we offered both moderate opinion in control design and effectiveness, with 2 medium recommendations and 1 low. That decision was partly due to the increasing cost pressures on local governments, with more Section 114 notices being made across the UK. Therefore, budget management becomes of increasing importance to safeguard the council's financial security. The scope of this audit was to provide assurances over budget management procedures by reviewing policy, training provision, reporting to senior management, interviews with budget holders, and review of the environment process. Whilst good practice has been noted, particularly with positive feedback from budget holders as to the support they receive from finance business partners, I'll focus on the medium findings for the interest of time. From interviews with the budget holders, whilst they receive introductory training, they would benefit from further regular training. And from completing this audit within several local authorities, this is quite a common audit finding, especially with those budget holders that have less finance background. And it's important that these budget holders receive sufficient training so that they can hold accountability of their budget and avoid too much reliance on their finance business partners. Budget holders will meet monthly with their finance business partners to assess their budget position and action any alterations to the budget that are required. There's not an action log in place to monitor the completion of these actions, and it's important that the actions are monitored for completion to make sure that there is effective budget management in place. Onto the procurement report, we have also provided a moderate opinion for both control design and effectiveness, with 2 medium findings, which is a fairly positive outcome. As I'm sure you're aware, this audit follows a lot of changes to the procurement legislation, with the new Procurement Act coming into force in February of this year, which changed the landscape with new requirements. In 2021-22, we completed a similar review, which received a limited control design and moderate control effectiveness opinion, which shows there's been some progress, but there's still room for improvement. The scope of this audit was to determine the work done by the Council to implement the requirements of the new Procurement Act within policy and training, as well as following 8 contracts from procurement to contract management to determine if processes were followed effectively. As the Act was newly introduced at the time of our audit, our sample testing covered contracts that were subject to the previous legislation, not the new February 2025 Act. Whilst the onus on ensuring contract signature sits with the Council, due diligence checks were previously outsourced to North East Derbyshire District Council. They would provide a form that showed the score provided against several categories such as credit risk, but not the credit risk report that goes alongside that. The service is now provided by Orbis Procurement. Despite the recommendations we've offered, we do have some good practice to highlight. These are in the report, but I'll just name a few now. The Council have undertaken a review of supplier spend for the first time in October 2024 to determine where procurement processes may not have been followed correctly. They then met with department leads where non-compliance was identified to provide information as how to procure services correctly in the future and rectify the issues that were identified. The Council aimed to complete this annually, which will help identify if there's any areas where there's continued non-compliance and help training needs analysis. Policies have also been updated to reflect the new Act, and initial training has taken place to inform staff of these changes. However, a new procurement manager started in April of this year and has several plans to take on further training and improvements to the procurement processes. Management responses to this report also demonstrate willingness to take on all of the recommendations of this report, which is very positive. So the recommendations we've offered, in 4 cases, due diligence was not complete. However, of these, 2 cases were either a direct award or framework award, which reduces the risk and requirement for this due diligence. It's important that due diligence takes place and appropriate source evidence is obtained to ensure that the Council don't enter into contracts with excess risk, which could cause financial or reputational damage. And our second medium finding encompasses the contract management procedures. Whilst different contracts require different types and levels of contract management, there is a lack of consistency with regards to the contract management performed and evidence retained. In several cases, contract managers weren't able to provide any evidence of documented contract management, and the new Procurement Act places more responsibilities on local authorities to monitor supplier performance and publish contract notices for underperforming suppliers. Critically, without appropriate contract management, underperforming suppliers may not be identified and those issues escalated to senior management, resulting in financial or reputational damage. That's everything I wanted to cover today. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them now, and also any for Max's reports.
So before any questions, I will also highlight we have our local government sector update in the progress report as well. I won't go through that in detail, just short articles based on what we're seeing in the sector, but feel free to ask any questions on any of those as well.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. The comments I want to make relate to the first two reports. I mean, under the report on PASC, it is some elements that are particularly concerning. The fact that we've only logged 40% of the trees on the tree plotter system, 40% of the trees that we're responsible for. Then that's when also the fact that there's this backlog on reactive maintenance tasks. As the report points out, this could lead to fines and charges, not to mention the reputational risk, but obviously the primary overriding responsibility has to be safety. There have been a number of instances around the country where people, including children, have been injured or even killed, I believe, by falling branches and things like that in play parks and the like. I would hope that when the mapping of the trees began, they started with the ones that were deemed the most risk and worked outwards, if you like, rather than did it on a purely geographical basis. As for the other two findings on PASC, I think they just underscore some of the long-term problems that have been experienced down at the depot, which I think are now well on the way to being sorted with the new management structure in place. So hopefully they will be rectified soon, and your next time you look at those, things will be considerably better. And as far as fleet management is concerned, that's just another example of what I've just been saying. Clearly there have been long-term problems down there, and then hopefully with new management in place, then they should all be sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing to say is we don't hide from our weaknesses. So, we spend a lot of money for BDO to do the work on internal audit. We could point them towards audits where we know everything is fine and they find no recommendations. That's no good to me as a management. That's no good to BDO either for their success. So we do purposely point them towards areas we think probably not necessarily failing, but certainly need a good deal of improvement. PASC and depot services in general is definitely one of those areas, hence why these two audits were put forward, and we recognised and expected a moderate to poor report, and that's what we've got, no excuses. We see this as different, that we can build on those weaknesses and put improvement measures in place to do it. So if I go back to trees, the first point from Councillor Hughes, we don't know how many trees we've got, in all honesty. We believe we've got anywhere between 1 million and 2 million trees. Heck of a lot, and we've put no additional resource into this tree register. So hence the original timescale of 4 years, September 23 to September 27, that's still a tall order to register 250,000 trees every year. Hence why we're only 40% through. Why the target dates were set by the manager, and I can't comment because he's not here, by April 25 is just nonsense. But anyway, it is what it is, and it's published there. So I think September 27 for the tree login is probably realistic. And of course, once we've logged the trees, we then have to look what condition they're in. So, they may be good, they may be poor. They all need tagging and registering on the system. So to answer your second question, we probably haven't started on the poor ones because we don't know where the poor ones are until we get out and inspect them. So it is a work in progress. We're halfway through. It's disappointing we're halfway through, but without extra resource, probably can't expect any more. At previous council I've worked at, it has had serious consequences. Somebody was killed by a falling tree, and that was because the tree wasn't inspected, and these things unfortunately do happen in wild weather conditions. So absolutely we want to get this done. And of course we're very proactive as a council, so we've planted many trees at Digby Park, for example. So not only do we have the 1 million trees, we're also adding to that total every year. And of course, we have to monitor those as they grow from saplings up as well. So, you know, it is work in progress, and that's all I can say. We know what it is. We have a tree officer who does the work, but of course when he inspects them, then some might need work, some might not, which then leads you on to the second recommendation, where there's been a bit of a backlog in repairing those as well. So, as I say, no excuses. It's work ongoing, and I believe we've got a team of 3 people. I'm just looking in the tree team, so that they can't do everything. So, you know, all I'm trying to say is we acknowledge the problem and it will improve. Thank you.
I think just to add, particularly on the implementation date and to provide some reassurance to the committee, I think Mike's right, the 8th of April very much is too soon considering the level of work. I think that might have been a misunderstanding when putting that date in by the officer. What I would say is we've put for our follow-up purposes the 2027 date of September, albeit because this is a high recommendation, we have agreed that we will follow up on that periodically, not just leave it until that 2027 date, but look at the progress in between. So we can kind of raise any early escalations if that backlog isn't being cleared and those trees aren't being put on the system. Because what we don't want to do is get to 2027 and suddenly say, well, no, it's only 50% now, and the committee aren't aware of that. So that's hopefully providing some level of reassurance that although that date is quite a way in the future, there will be work from our perspective around monitoring that.
Just to remind the committee as well, we have spoke about this before, but any recommendations that come out of internal audits that are red or amber, so high or medium risk, do actually get logged onto the Pantena system and are monitored by officers. And Max's team do actually go and check up on those on a quarterly basis. So we have got processes in place to actually actively monitor those actions and risks. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Pope.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hughes has really asked the questions I was going to ask, but just hearing what you said, Mike, just on the issue of the trees, if we only know or think we know of where 40% of the trees we're responsible for are, it's quite possible that backlog of maintenance is much, much higher than is actually in here. Because there's potentially another 60% of trees that need some form of maintenance, which we don't even know about. So I was just wondering really whether that target of logging all the trees by 2027, you've said it's realistic, but whether that needs to we need to see if we can accelerate that, because I agree with Councillor Hughes, the risk to the public from poorly maintained trees in public spaces is huge. And if there's so many trees we're not even aware of, whether we can accelerate that and get a better idea of what needs to be done. The other thing I was just going to raise, and it relates to the inventory, which in the response has been undertaken, inventory of equipment, and a process put in place around logging use of that equipment. Can we have reassurance that that now is in place and it's functioning effectively? I'm just aware that from another place, shall we say, but related to Gedling Borough Council, that has been an issue before. Knowing what equipment is owned, where it is, and who's using it. So it's really just assurance that the processes that are outlined in the report are now in place and functioning effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. We'll try and accelerate it as much as we can. Within realism again, text resource, but we certainly are trying to do that. In terms of the repairs, we've already engaged an external contractor to help our in-house team to do the works. Clearly, tree surgeons aren't cheap and there's a lot of cost involved, but we recognise the importance of getting this done as soon as possible. In terms of logging in and out of equipment, yes, we've done a full inventory now. We know where everything is. We know where it's stored. It's tagged. Things like hand-arm vibration has been tested on them all. And we've got a new booking in and out system with the fleet manager now, so things like chainsaws or whatever, they're all maintained in and out as the staff do them. So again, it's some area that we have just recently tightened up on.
Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to ask almost exactly the same question as Councillor Hughes, with elements from Councillor Pope, so I won't go on about it. What I can say is thank you for the warts and all report, and I suspect it's much like painting the Forth Bridge, so I will look forward to 100% next time. No, I won't. Seriously, thank you for the complete report, and I'm very glad to hear about the good news in it. Thank you.
Councillor Greensmith.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the Streets and Parks Department and to some degree the, what do we call it, the fleet, where is it? Lost the page. The fleet management, that there's been staffing issues in these various departments. Has that now resolved itself, or are we still understaffed, therefore under-resourced in these departments? Has that caused some of these issues that we're talking about?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have had some problems. We've had not succession, we've had two fleet managers leave the council in the last couple of years. First one was there for a long time. He was the operator's licence holder, and we had a deputy in place who was trained to do that. Unfortunately, the first one left, and the one who was trained in the operator's licence has now also left. So we're left in this difficult position where we're seeking another one again, and the Traffic Commissioner has quite rightly given us 3 months extension to get them through the training. One is a new assistant director who hasn't joined us yet, but she'll be going through the training. And some members will be aware we've had a staffing restructure down at the depot, and we have successfully appointed an internal appointment to the fleet operations manager. So he is actively going through the CPC qualification now, and hopefully he will pass it first time. So mechanics are difficult. There is big demand out there. Private sector operators' garages do pay more than the council does. So we have had issues recruiting some mechanics in the past. So all I can say is at the moment we're fully staffed, but that could change tomorrow, unfortunately. So yeah, fairly positive outlook as I sit here today. Okay.
If I may, the target of September 2027 for the amount of trees that you have mentioned seems quite... small time period for so many trees. I don't know much about Tree Plotter, but is there a way that we could make it so that members of the public could also log trees? For instance, guiding groups and scouting groups have nature badges that requires them to identify trees or animals, and if we could get them involved, if we could find a way that they could photograph the trees as a quick visual inspection, would that be an option that would make it easier for our team?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly an interesting idea, so I'll take that away and ask. Obviously, they can't have access to the system, but absolutely photographs could be sent to us initially to get them on the system. Might be a good start. So, yeah, I'll take that back and, see what happens. Thank you.
Anyone else? Are we happy to note the recommendations? Councillor Hunt, sorry, didn't see you there.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a matter of interest, Mike, what are the names of the new fleet manager and the new contracts and procurement manager?
Contract and procurement manager is Paul Williams. The waste one, I don't.
And the waste was our previous apprentice. It's Cameron, but I can't remember his second name.
Is it Cameron Barron?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Cameron Barron. Thank you.
Any other questions? In which case, we have to note... Oh,
So I'd just like to thank the EDA for bringing these reports to us, the audits to us, on budget and on time. Thank you.
Okay. We're happy to note the report. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. If we move on to agenda item 7, which is the internal audit annual report. Again, I believe it is Max. And thank you again. Take it away.
Thank you again, Chair. So this next item on the agenda is our annual report. So under the public sector internal audit standards, replaced recently by the global internal audit standards, which are the standards that we work to as an internal audit service, we are required to provide local authorities with an annual opinion. So what this annual opinion is based on the level of assurance provided from our reviews, so our work delivered throughout the year, other sources of assurance, so colleagues in external audit, general levels of assurance from outside, so things like, for example, the peer review, which I know the council had a few years ago, and other areas that we're aware of, that all feeds into our overall head of internal audit opinion. Also kind of softer areas such as engagement from management, engagement with the plan, and things like that contribute to our annual opinion, because that's an indicator ultimately of governance within the organisation. This opinion, to narrow it down, is essentially our head of internal audit opinion on the governance, risk management and internal controls at the council. So our scale of assurance ranges is 4 pillars. So you've got no assurance at one end, where essentially we're saying there is absolutely no assurance we can provide to the council. There are fundamental issues here. At the other end of the scale is substantial assurance, where it's the complete opposite. So we're saying actually from our reviews and the work we've done, we're able to give very high levels of assurance over the effectiveness of controls and how they're designed. And then in the middle, you've got limited, which is on the more negative side, closest to no assurance, and then moderate, which is on the positive side, closer to substantial assurance. We're pleased to give moderate assurance to the council, which is consistent with last year. And actually, if I look across my portfolio of local authority clients, generally most fit into that moderate assurance camp. So you're in line with other authorities across the sector. What you'll see on page 83 in your pack onwards is the summary of the individual audits that we've brought to this committee over the year. So I won't go through those in details because you've heard them all throughout the year, but that provides a table which graphically shows those levels of assurance that we've provided at different reviews. What I think is useful, however, is on page 92 of your pack. So there's 3 graphs which summarise the changes year on year around our number of recommendations, our design opinions and our effectiveness opinions. So what you will see is actually overall on that top line, the number of recommendations has remained pretty stable year on year in 24-25 to the prior year. We've seen a higher proportion of lower significance findings, which we see more as housekeeping areas. So actually there's a positive direction of travel there. Similarly, there's fewer, the design opinions are reasonably stable, but there's been no limited assurance design opinion. There has been 2 limited assurance effectiveness opinions. So where we're saying on effectiveness, you've got your controls, how effectively are they operating, which is a rise from last year, but actually taking into account what Mike said, to a degree, that can be seen as a positive because it means we're looking in the right areas ultimately. And actually, part of this year's programme, there were reviews in there, which as Parks and Street Care, which we knew was a challenge before the review started, and also temporary accommodation, which is where the other limited was, and that I think is a known challenge across the country. I'll pause at that point to invite any questions on the annual report tool.
Councillor Strong.
Thank you. I noticed where it comes to temporary accommodation that the safety checks, there's 19 out of 20. There's no evidence that they've been done in 19 out of 20 cases. Surely these are a bit of a priority. Is there a problem in doing these? Is there an inherent problem that we face?
So on these checks, these relates to checks of properties used for temporary accommodations. This report was brought, I think, to the last committee back in March.
Sorry, I wasn't there.
Oh, no, okay, that's fine. So the reason, obviously, 19 out of 20 is quite a large level of non-compliance. The challenge around this was resources at the time, and actually at the time of our review, processes were being put in place to rectify that and provide resource to do those checks. So actions were being taken at the time, but obviously our review's taken, all we can kind of report on is what we see across our sample period. So that kind of, I guess, explains to a degree the level of non-compliance, but there were, say, steps being taken to rectify some of those.
So can I take it that this is now in process of being done?
So we understand it. I'd like bring Mike in. So our follow-up processes, we will follow up on those recommendations as they fall due. So we will be able to bring that assurance back to the committee and whether that's been implemented. I don't know if anyone wants to add any comments on the panel on this.
Through Chair, yes, I've been assured by staff that those checks are done. In fact, some of them were done before, just weren't documented, unfortunately. So they are fully documented now. So yes.
Any other questions? Mr. Corwin?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, probably for Max. And I probably know myself what the answer is, but I think it might be beneficial to the committee to know how. I think it'd be quite good for the council to have an ambition towards a substantial opinion. And in broad terms, can you just explain to the committee how we could get to that substantial level?
So I think to start by setting the scene across my portfolio and across our BDO portfolio of local authority clients, only one has received substantial assurance, and you were on the committee last week, but that was provided. In terms of getting there, there's a number of factors that feed into our opinion, which ultimately would lead to that arriving at substantial. Probably the key start would be, what are we seeing across our internal audit opinions on both the design and the effectiveness? If I'm coming to this committee this time next year and you look at that table and it's green everywhere, there's a full suite of substantial, then clearly you would more likely fit in that category of substantial. The reality is there are a number of challenges that limit that. We've talked a lot about resources today. There's obviously budgetary pressures, which we alluded to in the budget management report. And actually, I think there's definitely a positive that can be taken around the fact that I think this plan is a risk-based audit plan we follow, and I think we're looking in the right areas. So sometimes it shows a few hard messages to digest, and the limited opinions are hard to read, but actually it's probably better that we see them than we don't. So I don't know if I've quite answered your question, but ultimately I would say is those assurance opinions would be what would steer us towards that end-of-year opinion.
That exactly answers the questions, Max, so thank you for that. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, then we need to note and approve the annual reports and head of internal audit opinion. Happy to move that we approve this. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Oh, this is a nice, easy committee today.
Sorry, we need a seconder, Chair.
Oh, we needed a seconder. Yep, Councillor Pope's happy to second.
Thank you.
Do we need to go through it again, or are we happy to?
No, we're okay.
Okie dokie. Right, so in which case I think that's the last by BDO. So thank you, BDO, and also thank you, Mazels, for attending. Moving on to agenda item 8 now, which is the Corporate Risk Management Review Quarter 4, and I believe that's you again, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is my last report to you today, and as usual, it's to update members on the current level of assurance against each of the corporate risks. So this is as at quarter 4. Now, I do apologise because I believe in the report in section 3 it does say quarter 3, but it should say quarter 4, so we will get that changed. So there has been 2 risks that have been reduced through quarter 4. The first one of those is capacity capacity for service delivery. Now, this has reduced from a 12, which was probable and major consequences, to level 9, which is probable and serious consequences. Now, if you recall, at Q3, this risk was increased due to the capacity in ICT department, which identified gaps to support service delivery. Since the risk was increased, a lot of work has been undertaken by the ICT department, and a successful recruitment campaign was undertaken to a number of new and vacant roles. So whilst this risk is still amber, it is expected to reduce further in 25-26 as the new people come on board and can start to work to address those capacity issues in the ICT team. The second risk that has decreased is the risk around ICT technology. Now, this is very much linked to the capacity issue that we've just talked about, and again, is expected to decrease further in line with the capacity risks. The risk has reduced from a 9, which was a probable serious consequence, to a 6, which is a possible serious consequence. All other risks will remain as they were at Q3, and 2 risks out of the 13 are either within or below our risk appetite level. Reputation, which is sitting at a green, and service standards, which is sitting at a yellow. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Hughes.
Not so much a question as a comment. I mean, it's quite reassuring that 2 of the risk levels have reduced, particularly around IT, which I had concerns about in the past. So things are definitely moving in the right direction. And of course, none have increased. So we are moving in the right direction. Let's hope we do see the risk level for IT reduced in the next full year.
Yeah, I think, we do hope to see those risks come down further in 25-26. And I think it's fair to say as well that we might see some increase in risks as we go into the new year, and particularly where we're doing a lot of work around our projects. I think you might recall from last time, we have got quite an ambitious delivery plan with a lot of projects on there that we need to deliver in the next 12 months. And we're actively working, identifying all those risks that are associated with those projects. So the risks may go up on that to come down again in the year, but that's the nature of the risks. We are assessing them as at a current point in time and putting mitigations and actions in place to reduce them. So whilst it's great to see risks come down, I think we just also need to acknowledge that sometimes they may go up as we identify new risks as well. Thank you.
I can't see anyone else indicating. Are there any more questions? In which case, the recommendation is to note the current risk levels and actions. And now that is on to item 9. Do we need people to agree? No? There are no items which have been notified to me that are urgent. However, after we've finished filming, we've been asked to stay behind to discuss a report that unfortunately was too late to be on the agenda. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you again to BDO and Mazars, and we'll turn off the cameras now, I believe.